Once upon a time, in a faraway land called Europe. Ah, yes, my good old friend Europe, once the mightiest of them all. Now such words have hardly been uttered in decades. Masters of sea and land, they not only ruled every cornerstone of the world, but also put humanity through one of the single greatest evolutionary leaps in human history, from science, law, philosophy, human rights, medicine, and the countless of innovations and discoveries that has changed humanity forever. Without Europe, billions of humans would still live in extreme poverty and be stuck in another age. Today, the best we can offer is bureaucracy on steroids and, to be fair, the best designed plugs in the world.
I have the first place trophy for that.
But just how bad has the situation become? Lately, you might have seen a few YouTubers making videos covering Europe, not exactly instilling much hope for the future of this continent, but I am going to take it a little step further.
Chill.
Much of all the issues that Europe faces today can quite literally be traced back to a single event, the 2008 financial crisis. When this financial crisis hit the world, Europe was simply woefully unprepared and didn't understand how to correctly respond to this banking crisis. The Americans in the Bush administration worked day and night in the immediate aftermath to solve this crisis and quickly understood they had to respond with urgent financial aid that, while unpopular at the time, was completely necessary to stop the economic collapse and prevent a stagnating economy. Europe, on the other hand, just didn't get it right. Politicians simply didn't understand this crisis and the severity of the situation, and also because of the way the European Union is structured together with the European Central Bank, it simply also took ages to react and respond to this crisis. While the Americans quickly pumped a massive amount of cash into their society, which quickly stimulated the economy and boosted productivity and business, the Europeans focused on debt reduction and austerity. Essentially, the Europeans decided to do the opposite of the Americans. Together with late and slow responses, it led to a massive productivity, innovation, and growth drought, which to this date still haunts the continent.
But wait! There's more!
I don't think you realize just how jarring it is when you look at the actual numbers.
You're completely sure of the math.
My math specialist, look at him. You notice anything different about him? Look at his face.
That's pretty racist.
For the Americans, it only took 1 year to get themselves out of this crisis and get their economy back on track. Today, that means they have seen massive compounding growth, with GDP per capita consistently growing for almost 2 decades by now. And this is despite already being the largest economy in the world. When you compare the numbers, you truly realize the scale of the economic issues in Europe. It's almost been 20 years since the 2008 financial crisis, and yet most countries, even to this date, have not even managed to recover back to their original numbers from 2008. That includes countries like United Kingdom, France, Italy, Spain, and the list goes on.
I expected it to be, pretty bad, but this is really bad.
To put into perspective just how crazy almost 20 whole years of no growth is, 20 years is the same stretch of time from when America entered the Great Depression in the 1930s to 20 years later in the 1950s, when Americans enjoyed the highest quality of living ever accomplished by any humans in history. This is where it gets scary. Despite stagnating economies, European countries want to continue spending huge sums of money on certain expensive services. Citizens do not want to let go of these luxuries that they've grown accustomed to, like free healthcare, social services, welfare programs, high pensions, and everything in between. But with no productivity growth for almost 20 years, that means you can't really afford these public luxuries. And so, with no money, how do you pay for it? Leaders and politicians have responded by taking on some of the highest levels of debt in the world. What politicians are doing to keep voters happy and therefore themselves in power is essentially putting future generations into massive debt and have them pay off the trillions and billions so the people of today can continue to enjoy their luxuries, which on paper cannot be afforded.
Hey, there's a bubble.
How do you know?
Trust me, call Venet.
The debt levels are so high that the interest payments alone on this debt is bigger than the entire budget for things like the military or education. Countries like Greece, Italy, France, Belgium, Britain, Spain, Portugal, and on are essentially bankrupt, sitting on some of the highest levels of debt in the entire world.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
But here is a twist. Most large institutions do not want to lend money to governments and countries unless they can actually show they have a so-called growing economy that will be able to pay off this debt in the future. But since you have low fertility rates in Europe and productivity have not been growing for almost 20 years, how do you get cleared to borrow? This is where politicians have been taught a little cheat code. You don't actually have to try and grow your economy. You don't actually have to increase productivity. You can just import endless amount of foreigners. It doesn't matter what countries they're from. It doesn't matter what their culture is like. It doesn't even matter if they really have any skills. More people means more mouths to feed, which ultimately always slightly increases the overall GDP for a country, which is exactly what politicians needs to show institutions to become eligible to borrow money.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
Though you probably already realize more people does not equal more wealth for the already native citizens. By that logic, places like India or China, the most crowded places on earth, would have the highest living standards in the world and be the wealthiest places per capita, which they are not. More people means more pressure on all public infrastructure like schools, transportation, law enforcement, hospitals, etc. So if foreigners and their families don't offer any monetary gain for European countries, the government can just finance their lifestyles by taxing their own citizens and then spend that money on expensive social programs. Though there are a few countries in Europe that don't give two shits about PC culture, so they do report official immigration statistics that basically calculates just how much value certain people bring to society based on stuff like a background or nationality. Not surprisingly, at the very top you have groups of people like Americans, Scandinavians, or Japanese. But at the very bottom, there are actually entire groups of people and certain nationalities that on average, even over an entire lifetime, is a net loss and a drain for countries in Europe.
I prefer really not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble. And I don't want to be in big trouble.
It now shows over half of the GDP for many European countries comes from government spending. This is, for example, how British politicians have been able to brag about having the fastest growing economy in Europe, not because they have actually done anything brilliant. This overall growth in GDP is purely based on Britain taking in the highest levels of immigration in history. The wealth and living conditions for for the average Brit have not increased at all. In fact, many now say it's much worse than ever. In Britain alone, a staggering 10 million people between the ages of 16 and 64 are not actively looking for work, many on some form of government assistance, so they will not be counted as actual unemployed. This is how EU countries keep unemployment numbers artificially low, taking them out of official labor market statistics by the governments, though in reality the real number of unemployed people not working in Europe is staggering high.
Do whatever I want, no job.
Individuals in Europe haven't felt their lives have improved in years, for some even in decades, which is why many now start questioning the actual quality of this immigration and whether or not it's actually helping to improve their own lives. This is why Poland is such a fascinating story. It's a country that is also struggling with similar low fertility rates, but they have never prioritized immigration, and especially not any refugees besides from Ukraine. Yet this is a country that have seen one of the highest level of economic growth in the world. GDP per capita have increased, household income have increased, salaries have increased. Poland is quickly becoming a richer and richer place to live, soon expected to match some of the biggest economies in Europe. But it's not just wealth. Poland is now one of the safest societies in the world, boasting some of the lowest crime statistics anywhere on the globe. In comparison, countries like Britain, Germany, France, Sweden, etc. have seen a massive increase in sexual assault, rape, shootings, gang violence, even bombings. You even now have places like Sweden being labeled the great capital of the world, or places like London where a new case is reported every hour, which truly makes you question, is it all worth it?
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
In the past 20 years, Western Europe have had to deal with dozens and dozens of terrorist attacks. In Britain alone, over 50,000 people are on a terror watch list, with at least over 90% for Islamic terrorism. You now have massive grooming gang scandals in places like Britain, where foreign men are targeting small little British girls. Every few days, a new sexual assault on white girls by so-called refugees funded by taxpayers is being reported. In Germany, on a single night, you had one of the single worst cases in the world, with hundreds of girls being sexually assaulted on New Year's Eve, which, by the way, public figures in Germany tried to cover up because the perpetrators had Arab or Muslim backgrounds. In Amsterdam, 90% of women in their own city now actively avoid certain neighborhoods due to terrorist attacks and threats becoming a normal everyday thing. Simple traditional events like Christmas markets now needs massive security and barriers just to avoid normal people enjoying their holidays from being slaughtered. Alone this year, yet another Christmas market terrorist attack was fortunately prevented, with 5 Islamists arrested. The legal system in many countries face the biggest backlog in criminal court cases ever, with the prison population being so overcrowded. They now release violent criminals early so they can find new space for new convicts. And the list goes on and on and on. It would be impossible to include everything. We would simply sit here until next year. The question is, will Europe be able to solve all these challenges that is coming at them from all sides at the same time? And what will the continent actually look like 100 years from now?